إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. In one translation, indeed all praise belongs to Allah the Most High. We thank Him and we seek His aid and we seek His forgiveness and we seek refuge with Him from the evil of ourselves and from our bad actions. Whoever Allah guides, then there's no one who can mislead him, and whoever Allah causes to go astray, there's no one to guide him. I bear witness that there is no deity except Allah, who is unique and without partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His worshipper and His messenger, and the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and his family and his companions, and those who follow them with good intentions until the day of judgment. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and don't die except as Muslims. Again, O you who believe, fear Allah and don't die except as Muslim. But O mankind, be careful of your duty to your Rabb, who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the two of them spread forth many men and many women. Be careful of your duty to Allah when you demand your mutual rights, and be careful of your duty to the wombs that bore you. Indeed, Allah is our Raqib over you. O you who believe, fear Allah and always speak the truth. He will cause your deeds to be beneficial, and He will forgive for you your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and His messenger, then he has truly achieved a tremendous accomplishment. Indeed, the best speech is the book of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the most evil of all affairs are newly invented matters, which has no precedence in Islam. And all innovations are astray, and each astray is in the hellfire. No Allah, save us from it. No Allah, except our doer. When we look at the ayats of the Quran, we have to ask ourselves, is the Quran just for memorization, or is the Quran for internalization? And as Allah says in the Quran, that it is a rahmah and a shifa, and so it's a mercy and it's a healing. And so the Quran is medicine. It's not only medicine physically, because again, there are certain ayats that you can read and that you can get a healing from the Quran, but it's also a healing physically and spiritually. And so mind, body, and spirit is holistic. And so we have to basically utilize the Quran to heal our souls, to heal our bodies, and to heal, ourselves from a mental aspect as well. And so, as Muslims, one of my old teachers used to say, we can be Muslims in two ways. We can be Muslims in name, or be Muslims by commitment. And the vast majority of the Muslims in the world are probably Muslim by name only. It's like Allah tells about the people who have basically, they would talk about, why are you doing this? He would ask, why are you doing this? Oh, I found my father doing this. I found my grandfather doing this. I found my great-great-grandfather. Yeah, Muslims saying the same thing. You go all throughout the world. And alhamdulillah, many of us have grandchildren now. I remember all of us, we didn't have this gray in our beard. We have grandchildren for most of us. And We don't want our grandchildren to just be parrots of Islam. We want our grandchildren to basically take this to the next level. We want them to stand on our shoulders and take it to the next level. We established the masajids throughout the nation. The indigenous Muslims of this country have established many mosques in this country. And so when we get sick, where do we go? We go to the mosque or we go to the hospital. So when we go to the hospital, we hear names like, not Muslim names for the most part. When we see the names on the hospitals, we don't see Muslim names on these hospitals. So we have to start establishing hospitals, institutions. We're getting old, senior centers. I always tell my kids, I'm going to Gambia. I'm not going to let y'all put me in some place. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so what we have to do is start establishing the necessary institutions, the nation-building institutions. And brothers, we have to step up because we are the protectors. Allah says the men are the protectors and guardians and the maintainers of the women. I know in this country we went through women's liberation movement, but why this is kept? The Islamic world had a women's liberation movement 1,400 years ago. Because 1,400 years ago, women could not own property, women couldn't necessarily have their own wealth. Women were buried. If a man had too many children or with female children, they would bury them alive. And so Islam had a women's liberation movement over 1,400 years ago. But has this ayat been abrogated, my brothers? Men are the protectors and guardians and maintainers of women. Every time I open the door for a woman, whether it's Muslim or not, no, thank you. Or sometimes they'll get offended that I'm opening the door for them. Because Allah has given the one more than the other. And in some translations, because they say He has given them more strength. Because they support them from their means. And that's important, because they support them from their means. And it's just like I was talking to a brother yesterday, he was trying to get married, and and what I do in my community, I don't perform marriages unless they get 6 sessions of premarital counseling, at least 6 sessions of premarital counseling. And one of those sessions is economics. I tell brothers all the time, there's no romance without finance. Just because you have biological urges doesn't mean that you're ready to be married. And so what we have to do is start to create healthy families, brothers and sisters. Just left a session and the person had been married well over 20 years, but it just sounded like it was a horrible situation. And, when you ask, why are you staying in this situation? And I told the young lady, I said, I'm this age and you're that age, and 20 years from now, you'll still be younger than me. 20 years from now, you'll be younger than me. You want to stay in this situation. Marriage should not be a prison. Marriage should not be a prison. It shouldn't be for brothers nor sisters. And you hear all the time, I ask them, why do they stay in the marriage? And then they say, well, what's the words that say? Most abused 4-letter word in the English dictionary, love. I love her. I love him. And then what's the great philosopher, Tina Turner, said, what love got to do with it? You got to love Allah first. You love Allah first. And when you love Allah first, you will not allow yourself to be put in a toxic situation. When you love Allah first, again, you want to do things that's healthy, not only for you, but for your family. Even when you give sadaqah. The Prophet ﷺ says that the sadaqah should be for yourself, your family, and those outside of your family. And I take that as a general rule of just really, how do you take care of yourself? You take care of your family first. A lot of times we might treat friends better than we treat our families. And so, again, we have to basically start to recalibrate and look at, again, Islam, practice Islam and not Islam. We need to basically internalize this deen. Men are the protectors and maintainers and the guardians of women, because Allah has given the one more than the other, and because they support them from their means. Support them from their means. And we don't have to be millionaires to be married. When you go to different countries, you see You hear people say, I want this amount for a dowry. You might see, what's the dowry? Okay, I've got this goats. I'll give you a couple of them. But you're supposed to support them from their means. You don't bring a goat to a brother, to a sister in Atlanta, okay? I mean, it's lawful, it's not haram. But you drag a goat up to the door to the Father Wali house, and it's not gonna work. But the whole thing is, what are the means? And we have to be able to start to provide. It doesn't mean that you have to have a PhD or advanced degrees to be able to get married, but just to be able to provide for yourself first, and then be able to provide for the family. And then you work together. And I always tell the sisters, yes, we're supposed to provide for all of the food, clothing, and shelter, but when we work together as a team, then we can do more. I always say that being married, one whole individual and the other whole individual, it creates synergy, as opposed to just 1 and 1 being 2, 1 and 1 could be 20. You can do better, much better together. And even the research shows that people who are married, they tend to not only live longer, but they do better. They do better. And so we have to get away from this singlehood and be committed to just singlehood all the time. And you get divorced and it didn't work out, because I recommend, if it doesn't work out, I tell them all the time, because the Prophet ﷺ, when people came to him and says, my husband, my wife, and he would say, we divorce him. And what's again that 4-letter word? I love him. So they would keep him. He didn't trip. It's cultural, this whole issue of not, the law does not like divorce. It's a very weak hadith of all the things that Allah has created, that he made lawful is divorce. It's a very weak hadith. When you look at the Prophet ﷺ in his practice, when people will come to him, one sister came to him complaining, and he said, well, if you want to divorce them, give back the dowry. And that's the khula. The khula is not necessarily technically a divorce, it's an annulment of the marriage. But you have to get the dowry back if the husband wants that. And so when I look at the law, the legislation, of course, in Islam, we don't want families to break up. But if you're in a toxic situation, you will get impacted. You will get infected with that toxicity. You can get sick spiritually as well as physically. And so what we have to do is try to create healthy environments. And then we are the protectors, the guardians, and maintainers of women. And that has not been abrogated. No matter how liberated, sisters, you are, you need to take on that protection. If you have a husband or father or brother, or a brother who's appointed as your wali, use that. Your sisters all the time wanting to get married. Who's your wali? I'm my wali. I was married before. I said, no, that don't need to get a wali. Because men know men just like women know women. Have a wakil. If you don't have one, have the imam appoint a wakil for you, so that the man can investigate the situation and not just go from marriage to marriage to marriage to marriage to be married. You have to look at, what went wrong. You take the time, even though we can get married 3 months afterwards. Again, as a therapist, I always tell people, take 6 months to a year to yourself. Marry yourself for a while. Because the question that a friend of mine used to always ask to people, he said, would you marry you? With all of what you know about you, would you marry you? Again, therefore, the righteous women are devoutly obedient to their husband, and guard in their husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. As to those women whose parts you fear disloyalty, again, there's steps. Admonishment, talk about the separation, and then eventually you can basically, and Allah says to part in peace. To part in peace. Don't just hold them as a hostage. Again, marriage should not be a prison. It's important for us to develop strong families, because as most of us who are descendants of slaves in this country, we've only been allowed to be full human beings in the last less than 100 years, for the most part. When we look at the aspect of slavery, we look at Jim Crow, and then eventually we asserted ourselves in the 50s and 60s. And so we've not been able to have the benefit of healthy families for the most part, because we've always had this cloud of oppression around us. And we asserted ourselves in a strong way. in the 60s, and then Allah gave many of us Islam. One of the things that Imam Jamil used to talk about, please keep him in your dua, he talked about with all of the work they did in the 1960s, they didn't have a book. He said they had a book. We could have gone further. And so what we have to understand, we have the book, but we don't just want to spend a lot of time just memorizing. We want to internalize so that we can know what we do. Because again, the prescription is already there. The doctor is Allah. Allah says He's El Shafi. He is the healer. And what is the prescription? The Quran. But just like when you go to the human doctor and he gives you a prescription, you just set the prescription on the dresser, you don't get it filled, then the sickness will not be abated. The sickness will stay. And so we have to take the prescription, and the prescription for the brothers is prayer 5 times a day. And he says that the Prophet ﷺ said praying in the masjid is 25 to 27 times greater than praying at home. But for the sisters, they get that blessing even if they pray in the closet. They get the great blessing. Even if they pray, the more private they pray, the more blessings you get. You get that same blessing. And Aisha radiallahu anha had complained about the men got all of this and the men get all of that, and they would get a chance to go to jihad, and what do we do? And what the Prophet ﷺ said that if you make Hajj, you get the reward of jihad for a sister. So brothers don't have that. Brothers have tons of Hajj under their belt, but we don't get the reward of jihad, of dying a martyr. And so, although there is a difference, there's not an imbalance. We're different as men and women. And we have to understand, in the old days, even prior to any type of technology, men were the hunter and gatherers and the women were the nurturers. And we have to go into our natural roles and not just basically, try to be soft as men and be hard as women. We can't change those roles. Allah has given us this nature. We should strive to be men. But, again, not just coming to an imam and saying, well, I call them the after Isha, drive-bys, foaming at the mouth trying to get married. No, you need to be prepared. Prepare yourself for marriage, my brothers. And again, if we're the protectors and maintainers, we have to get some paper. The brothers say we got to get some cheddar, legal cheddar. And there's brothers now they're trying to, because a lot of our brothers are young brothers, and I'm really sick of it, selling drugs, using drugs. Brothers and sisters, I just want to keep it real with y'all. And just because and then they'll try to basically use Islam like a rabbit's foot. Oh Lord, hope the police don't catch me doing this haram. And so what we have to do is start to develop means for our brothers and sisters to provide for themselves. And the brothers are calling it halal money, and you should be hearing more about that. That's for all of the communities. So because you don't have to always go and get a degree. You don't have to always have certifications and things like that. But there are ways that you can make money, and you don't have to be looking behind your back. Maybe there's certifications you can get in computer. I'm sure some of you even have those. You can get computer certifications and sometimes make 6 figures and work from home. And there are businesses that you can do. There are healthcare certifications that you can get. But we have to basically be mentors, those of us who have made some mistakes in our lives, so that we don't have to be visiting our grandchildren in prison. And so we have to basically start to do the work. We have to mentor them, not just don't look back, because otherwise we'll create this vicious cycle of jail and death, drugs and death. All of us have had so much stuff that we are ashamed of talking about it. And I tell people all the time, the crap of the past can be fertilizer for the future. So all of the problems that we have had, we can allow the community to grow from that. But we have to basically, first of all, ask Allah to give us what is necessary so that we can build a strong community. And men are the protectors and maintainers of that community. What we have to understand is that this responsibility is not only to our community, but it's also, again, to our families, our community, it's also to the Ummah, the whole Muslim nation. Because just as we have a level of peace and security in this society, but we have to understand that many Muslims are suffering all over the world. And so what we have to do is be involved in helping people get rid of the challenges that they're facing in places like Palestine and in Myanmar, where you have the Rohingya Muslims who are being tortured and killed and burned, raped. But we tend to be like the proverbial ostrich with our head in the sand. But it can happen to us. Because it starts off with objectification. China, they're putting thousands of Muslims in what they call re-education camps. Re-education camps to get them, away from practicing deen, making them eat pork, making them drink alcohol, making them, during Ramadan, making them shave their beards. So, what can we do? As I mentioned on the Eid, talked about the importance of getting involved in the voting process. I know, like I say, in the old days, I didn't vote. But then we look at, in the old days, juries were picked from the voting rolls. Prosecutors are elected. So we have to get involved if we're going to be in this society. And the forces outside of this masjid are so divided that, again, the Muslims can make a difference, but we have to have a Muslim agenda. What is the Muslim agenda? And the scholars even say, if voting helps to benefit the Muslims, then vote. That's what the scholars say, most of the scholars. If you're living in a society where you are basically involved with the whole issue of democracy. So again, because you see what can happen if you don't have basically proper elected leadership. And so what we have to do is start to look at what is the agenda. And there are groups of Muslims who are involved politically, and so they're hopefully get involved in establishing. There's some local efforts as well. But you have to have, what is the agenda when you talk to, no matter, I'm not saying take a party, but you have to basically present, this is what we need. Our community is overrepresented in the prisons. We need to have prison reform. We need to have basically reform of sentencing, because the mandatory minimums do not allow the judges to have discretion in case of a situation where a person may need less time than what if the mandatory minimum says, well, you got to do 5 to 10. Then you have to take, and that was a political decision from the people who got elected. So we have to get involved on that level and not just basically, again, be like the proverbial ostrich in the sand. So there's a lot of work that we can do, brothers and sisters. If we've lost the right to vote, and that's another effort that we can make to basically develop a path for people who have felonies to get back their rights. Start with the right to vote and then the other rights. Because again, a lot of the prison, there was the video done talking about the amendments that guaranteed free the slavery, the ending of slavery, said except for imprisonment. And then they basically criminalized everything, spitting on the sidewalk, gathering too many people gathering, and then they would basically put you in prison and put you in the workhouse, they used to call it. And so what we have to do is recognize those are some of the tricks that have been played with the legislation. And we have to get involved. And for your young people, get involved. Learn the law. Get the law degrees. Get involved. If you have time, because your parents can sponsor you for 18 to 20, sometimes 25, 30 years, then get the education while you have that sponsorship. And then it's your role to basically start to make changes in this overall society. Because we have to be of those who are having a voice that is heard, brothers and sisters. We cannot allow ourselves to become just professional victims. There's a lot says in the Quran when the people were saying that basically they were involved in oppression, or basically being victimized by the oppressor. And then what Allah says, was not my earth spacious? Because we can make physical hijrah, or we can make spiritual hijrah. And spiritual hijrah means that you having a paradigm shift. You changing how you deal with individuals. You're setting limits. You're becoming more assertive, and then you grow. Otherwise, you have an implosion. And in our community, the African American community, for the most part, high rates of hypertension, high rates of heart disease, high rates of diabetes, because those are stress-related ailments. Because we're under so much stress, and racism and oppression has a certain amount of stress. When we walk into the store, no matter how wealthy we are, we get victimized for the most part. We get a certain look. You look at Oprah, she's a billionaire. She was, I believe, in Switzerland somewhere, and basically got challenged that she couldn't afford what was in that store. She could afford the store. But because of her pigmentation, she was looked upon in a certain way. So you cannot buy yourself away from racism. But just like we did in the 60s, we pushed it back. We can't legislate how a person feels in their heart, but we can set limits as to how we get treated. If I've said anything that's inconsistent with what Allah has given us, and the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, I take responsibility for that. And if I've said anything in which you have gained some new insight, as always, all praise is due to Allah. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وهو على كل شيء قدير. And men are the protectors, the guardians and maintainers of women, because Allah has given the one more than the other, because they support them from their means. And we have to recognize that we like a tribe. And others are, as Allah says, we made into nations and tribes to get to know one another and not despise each other. So we can be tribal from a racial perspective, we can be tribal from, basically a political perspective, we can be tribal from a cultural perspective. But it doesn't mean that we cannot basically collaborate with one another. And we negotiate as to, again, what is the Muslim agenda? We have to basically be more involved and allow us to grow, because again you have to there's a saying that to struggle where you're at, and then Allah will bring you together. He's Al-Jami, that's one of his names, the Cat. To struggle where you're at. And so the Muslims in China will be impacted if we start going back to the election, electing people and talking, like even was it Marco Rubio, I believe his name. He basically started advocating for the Rohingya people. And again, his politics aren't similar to mine, but again, you should be able to talk to him. You should be able to talk to the people, the senators who love, even though they're of a different party, or even if it's the same party. You have to start talking to these people so that they can put pressure on these countries that are causing the problems for the Muslims. Because again, we will be asked about, okay, did you write a letter? Did you call? There's an app called with 5 calls that you can reach all of your elected people in the federal level, just from one cell phone. I mean, as phones get smarter, the folks get dumber. So we can use all of these tools that Allah, because He's made the world small for us to be able to get to people. And I'm saying that, our people in Palestine, our people who are struggling in Yemen, our people, because again, even though these are all supposed to be Muslims fighting each other in Yemen, killing each other. They blew a bus up with children, killing children, and so that's not Islam. That is not Islam. And so we have to start exerting pressure so that we can create a precious jewel, the jewel of Islam. And that's how we have to do it, because again, we will be questioned as to what did you do with your time? What did you do with your wealth? What did you do if Allah gave you health? Because the Prophet said, you remember again your old age and your youth. Remember when you remember your sickness when you're healthy. Remember your wealth before you get to poverty. And remember your life before death. Remember your free time when you get preoccupied. And so what are you doing with your time? Because Allah says He is time. And when we raised up, there'll be no more time. This would be just like a minute. As the Prophet ﷺ talked about how life is like a person who is resting on a journey under the shade of a tree for a few minutes. That's what life is. And that true journey is the hereafter, the eternal life. And so that's what we have to start visualizing and internalizing, that we want to get prepared for the true journey. We want to get prepared for the life after this life, because that's when we truly live. And I always tell people, this is just the middle womb. The first womb is in our mother's womb. And this is just a bigger womb, and then true life is when we're born after death. Where do you want to be? You want to be in the purifying fire, or do you want to be of those who are getting Jannah? And again, so the Jannah, one piece of Jannah fell on earth, it would just outshine all of creation. Just one piece of Jannah. And we can't even visualize that. It's like an amoeba trying to visualize us what Jannah is. And so we have to start working, brothers and sisters. We have to start from this day forward. If we haven't been doing it, we just go on from the job to the mosque, and not caring about the people who are homeless, not caring about the people who are dealing with economic issues, not caring about the people who are dealing with political issues that are causing them death, not caring about the people who are being faced with the challenges of this storm. Alhamdulillah, Muslims are being involved in helping the evacuees. In the last storm, the Muslims did a lot of the work, and there were many people that took shahada based on the fact this is the first time that they were involved with the Muslims. And so, again, all of the communities have banded together to be able to take in people. And so each of you will be asked to do something, even if it's just giving people a kind word, because if you're displaced, that can be very distressing and depressing. And so we have to, again, stop being the proverbial ostrich. We have to basically strive. We have to be like the eagle that soars. We have to be the person who is basically using the Islam as a means of changing the society. The law says he does not change our condition until we change what is in our hearts. And the Prophet ﷺ says that there's a morsel of flesh. If it is bad, the whole body is bad. And if it is good, the whole body is good. And that morsel of flesh is the heart. He says that the heart will rust, and that which removes the rust from the heart is the remembrance of Allah. And so we have to remember Allah constantly. We have to remember Allah constantly. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there are 100 parts of mercy for Allah, and He has sent down out of these one part of mercy upon the jinn and human beings and the insects. It is because of this one part that they love one another, show kindness to one another, and even the beast treats its young with affection. And Allah has reserved 99 parts of mercy from which He would treat His servants on the day of resurrection. And so all we have is the one part of mercy, and will we receive so much mercy on the day of judgment that we cannot fathom it. Among His signs is this, that He created for you, make from among yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them. And He has put love and mercy between your hearts. Verily in that are signs for those who reflect. Verily in that are signs for those who reflect. And again, the Prophet ﷺ, in closing, he says, none of you will have faith till he loves me more than his father and his children and all of mankind. None of you will have faith till he loves me more than his father, his children, and all of mankind. And when we look at these types of words, we have to see how much are we internalizing. Do we really love the Prophet ﷺ? If we love the Prophet, we should strive to emulate him. Be like him. He says that he is the best of you, because he's the best to his family. And so if we're the best to our families, then we're emulating the Prophet ﷺ. So if a sister needs something, the brother should be able, again, the hunter-gatherer. Even if you're struggling and needing sadaqah, the sister should not have to go to the imam. The brother should, basically go to the imam. If the family needs something, again, do whatever you have to do as long as it's legal, so that you can take care of your family and support your family from the means, but create the means. When people made the hijrah from Mecca to Medina, the people who were basically merchants and businessmen, they continued to be. They left everything, but they had a winning attitude when they got to Medina. So just show me the marketplace, and I'll get what I need to get. And we have to develop that type of attitude. Bugs have better attitudes than many Muslims, because they work all day to get theirs, and that's what you have to do. Allah has given you the ability to work, ability to think, ability to talk. Then there's ways of developing an income. If I say anything again that you benefited from, as always, all praise is due to Allah. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا فيه واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين كما تصلح من فضلك.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا